Happy Saturday. It is July 6th at 9 a.m. exactly. We're always on time perfectly. Thanks to
And
Dan.
we've been meeting every Saturday for how long now? How many? It's
Years.
been
I,
like
I don't know.
years
It's
and years.
definitely been at least like 15 to 20 years at this
I
point.
feel like that. Yeah, it feels like that
Hmm.
sometimes.
Definitely been like at least 100 or so years, I think.
Plus or
Yeah.
minus.
Plus or minus 99.
Yeah.
But still,
Dude, one of the best things we ever did though was meeting every week because like it is so
oh, it's the
helpful
best.
for everything.
I mean, like I think everybody knows that who's inside our group. They look forward to Saturdays, and I've never like looked forward in all the time that I've worked a job in my life.
Yeah, I
I've
know,
never looked
right?
forward to Saturdays more than I do now, and the only reason why is for this call. So
Yeah,
and the following call, um, but yeah, I mean, go
pretty
us,
amazing.
go
Yeah.
us.
I
God.
just wanted
I
to
was just
celebrate us
thinking
for a
this
minute.
past week about when we were working on that designing that pizza website. Papa
Oh yeah,
Thomas.
yeah, that
Yeah.
was
That was a
awesome.
blast.
That was fun. Yeah, I
Yeah.
wonder whatever happened with that. We were for anybody watching, after we got out of our boot camp, we sort of like got all these people from our boot camp to join us into a call where we started rebuilding the Papa John's website. And
With this Scrum Master. Scrum
yeah,
Master.
with the Scrum Master. Yeah. And
Scrum
it
Master.
started. I mean, I think one of the issues there was that Papa John's was updating their website faster than we could build it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So every
With
time
the
we
skills
would,
that the boot camp left everybody with.
yeah, which was
Yeah.
minimal. Um, so every time like people would go to change it, it's like they were basically changing the goalposts on us. Like we're like, oh man, we just built that component, but they removed it from their site and added a new one.
But it's a
uh,
new season and new specials, so they're moving
yeah,
on.
yeah. Got the Valentine's Day pizza now,
Uh,
heart-shaped pizza. Yeah, anyway, so how are you guys doing this Saturday? How was your week? Good, good. You
I had
guys
a
got
good week.
coffee?
Yeah.
Check out this sweet coffee mug. Look at that.
Whoa.
Good morning, Jay. Good morning, Randall.
Those are some nice
Nice.
Morning,
Oh, you got
guys.
mushrooms.
mushrooms. That's
I
sweet.
know.
Yeah.
I got, you can't even see mine because it's
It's
clear.
Whoa.
invisible.
It's an invisible cup. There you go.
I see it now. How is
There it is.
everybody this morning? Good to have you guys here. Well, I mean, I guess we might as well just get right
I was
into it.
gonna say, what are we doing today?
Yeah, today we're talking about how to overcome imposter syndrome and feeling overwhelmed, and really like what do you do when you feel like a deer in headlights looking at code? Because I think this idea for today's video spawned out of our Wednesday call when I was just talking about logic for about an hour straight, and I think I made a lot of people into deer in headlights.
You
So
know, it's funny though, because I don't know what you guys think about this. Because I was just thinking about this too after that call, actually, which is funny. But I mean, I always learn the most when I'm in way over my head. And
yeah,
which is not to say that like, you're in over your head in the sense like you're like performing a job for someone that you can't do. But like we're talking about learning where like I think it's okay to do that because there is no risk of like, you know, you're failing, maybe if you do fail, causing like a major problem for other people. It's just you're trying to learn stuff.
yeah. I mean, we don't learn anything but without being out of our comfort zone. I think it's so easy to get stuck in our comfort zone because it's comfortable.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
there's just no way for you to expand as a human being without taking on something that you're not used to or that you're not familiar with. Um,
Bryce said
Bryce
he
said,
learns the most all the time and like
yeah. Yeah, that's good though, right?
yeah, it
Because you're
is.
putting yourself in a position where you don't understand what's going on, so you're forced to understand it, right? You're forced to figure it out. And I think we saw that a lot because this past Wednesday I was talking a lot about the logic of our match game app that we're building, and also in with that it was sort of grouped in like all of the React and Next.js concepts that you need to understand in order to build something like that. And admittedly, I probably didn't explain those from a very basic level. Like there was some.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I mean,
Okay. I mean,
you
I
did a good
thought maybe
job.
Yeah,
there
it was
was some
very good.
interpretation that you need to understand, but I mean, that's something that's going to happen as a developer. And so we as developers have to have those tools, right? Because I can't tell you, even knowing React and Next and, being at the level that I am, how many times I have looked at code and been like, WTF is going on here,
Yeah. And like,
right?
you
Yeah,
know, it's
so
oh good.
yeah, so like I remember Danny and I were talking not too long ago about how we were watching movies from childhood and saw stories in the movies now that we completely glossed over as children. And
Hmm.
that's kind of like what happens when you're learning brand new code is like, you can only learn so much at a time. And so you get overwhelmed. You feel like a deer in headlights. And there's all this stuff that you miss. But then when you go back
Yeah.
to it a little bit later on, you can catch up on all that stuff and it seems a lot easier.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
totally.
I remember too, like, oh my God, when we started, like I'd look at code and it looked like just like it looked like hieroglyphics, you know what I mean? Like especially like when you got into like even like moderately complex logic, it was like crazy looking. And I do remember like a time where like I started looking at stuff and I was like, oh my God, I can read that. Like I can like that totally makes even like a language I didn't know, I could piece together what was going on. And it's an amazing feeling, but the only way to get there is to look at stuff that's beyond you. Like there's
Yeah.
no way to do it otherwise. It's a whole learning process, right? Is like pushing yourself, like you said, beyond your boundaries. Otherwise, we'd all be stuck in the exact same space we're in. And I mean, everybody here wants to move to a different space, I think. That's why they're here, right? They want to transition, they want to learn something new, they want to go build skills, and it requires, being uncomfortable.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I remember like a week or so ago, I was coding in the kitchen of my house, and one of my kids was like, she was like, "What are you even doing? Like that looks like absolute just like another language." And I was like, "It literally is."
Yeah.
So I think that's something that's sort of important for people to remember is you're learning literally another language. So imagine that you were in a language class, like you were learning French or Spanish or German or something like that, and you walk into that class, that teacher is going to know a lot more than you do, right? And you're not expected to understand all of it, and you're going to feel like a deer in headlights a lot, right? Like while
Yeah.
you're learning that. And so the only way that you can push forward is by sort of just taking it like as it comes and trying to slow it down and comprehend it. And so I guess that's really sort of where we're going with this is what strategies do you guys have for when you feel that way, when you feel like not only just like imposter syndrome, I think that's something that we've addressed before, and that's great to address again, but like, what do you do when you look at code and you're like, I don't have the slightest clue what's going on here? What do you guys
I,
suggest? Like, how do you actually work on that?
I like that you make that analogy of it being like another language because I have learned a
It
couple
is.
other languages and I
Yeah.
did one the old-fashioned way like learning in high school in
Hmm.
America and I did another the immersive way going to a language school in France and learning French. And I got to
Yeah.
say that going in the immersive environment it was way more difficult in the beginning. I was complete deer in headlights. Like if you ever saw that Simpsons episode where Bart goes to France, that's exactly what I felt like. And but eventually, one day it just clicked. But I was able to get there so much more quickly than I was trying, like learning 1 hour a day at school Spanish for 4 years, I don't know, two,
Yeah.
3, 4 years. And so it's kind of if you can do the same thing with coding, because I think a lot of people, especially people in the web dev incubator, I mean, they're definitely immersed in coding. They're doing it nonstop. And
Yeah.
that's you're
And they're working with
uncomfortable.
experienced people too, so they're immersed fully. It's not even just like
Yeah.
Hmm.
yeah.
So what
The
else? Like, if you're in that moment of like, okay, like, what happened on Wednesday? We're staring at code and it just looks like gibberish. uh,
well,
What do you do in that moment? Go
I want to
ahead.
make a point first too, which was like, because you had sort of briefly touched on this earlier, but like, even when you've been doing this for a while, like, you have to remember, like, we work with Next a lot, but these things change constantly. You were just mentioning before we got on, like,
Yes.
about React's just got, released this new version and stuff. There's new stuff in it. And like, if we didn't keep pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zone, we would never learn the new versions of it. And eventually, like, our code would be garbage, would break, would be a security risk. Like, so
Yeah.
that's part of the nature too, I think, of this type of field is that you just have to be ready to keep learning and keep being willing to push yourself outside. Or like if you get a job, like you might know one language and they might want you to write in a totally different one. So you're expected to learn it, which is going to be outside your comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I
And
think that's
you make a good point there, which I think is that, when you're working in the industry, everything's going to change on you. Like the goalposts are going to change all the time, right? There's new updates to software and frameworks pretty much monthly. I mean, I don't think there's ever been a month that I've been a software developer where something big hasn't changed somewhere. So there's always new things to learn, and it's something where you can never be caught up, right? Like you're always behind the ball. So getting comfortable with that and that understanding of like I may not know everything, but when I need to, I can learn it and I can use it how I need to. That's really important because also like your employers aren't going to expect that you know every single thing about everything, but they do want you to be able to apply yourself and figure out how to find the answers when you need to.
I'm glad you said too, because nor do you need to know everything about everything. But what you do need
Yeah,
to know is how to learn it and how to be comfortable outside of your comfort zone. That's basically what you need to
exactly.
know. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
I would say too, when you do feel like a deer in headlights though, and like you're looking at that, like there is a point where like I think everyone should take a break. Like if you're getting really
yes.
frustrated, if it's making you angry, if like, things just aren't coming together, that is a sign that you need to walk away for 10, 15 minutes, maybe even a day. Just let it sink in your head and then come back to it. But that's the hard part too, is you have to come back as well. And I think there
Yeah,
is
and
that danger early on where people do just know it's too hard, and just abandon it
yeah,
rather than
and
sticking with it.
I think that's a great point, and like don't just avoid it. I mean, one of the things that I think is going to happen on this Wednesday coming up is that we're going to review that code again, and it's going to make a lot more sense to everybody who watched that, because you had a week to sort of look that over and review it and let it process in your brain because
Yeah.
it's something that's brand new, right? Like you're not going to understand something until you've heard it a couple times. Just like learning a new language, like you're not going to learn a new word the first time and have it every time and understand it. You have to hear it from a different
But
perspective,
we
different
always expect
people's
to.
interpretation of it. Yeah, exactly. You expect to, but yeah, I got that going to Colombia recently, right? Because I know I'm not like fluent in Spanish, but I understand some of it. I understand a lot more than I can speak, but a lot of the Spanish that I know is from going to Mexico. And so going to Colombia, people have a slightly different dialect. So there's like a lot of words that I should understand, but I don't because people say them a little bit differently. And it's the same in coding. You're going to see code that maybe you've seen somewhere before, but it looks a little bit different because of how it's implemented. Or, that was something that I think Bryce had this week where he had this aha moment where I basically took, you know, a one line piece of logic that was built into CSS and then showed him how that would look in a function. And he was like, oh my God, that just made sense to me. Right. And it's because you're seeing it in a different way. But this is like what we as developers get to do when we get more advanced because you're starting to see, like, okay, I'm taking small principles and building them up into something where I can one line like this huge logical operator that does something really powerful. Instead of writing like 100 lines of code, I literally wrote one line of code. Right.
So there are a couple things, a couple mindsets that I always fall back on when I'm struggling with things, and I've definitely been struggling with some things recently because I'm studying for an exam that's way beyond my present capabilities. But uh, one mindset is anything someone else can do, I can do. And
Absolutely.
then
Yeah.
a similar mindset, but just a little bit different, is on a long enough time frame, I can learn anything. And
Yeah.
so, like, oftentimes with myself and probably with some other people, the struggle comes when you're trying to learn something quicker than you can naturally learn it.
Yeah.
And it gets really frustrating because you want to learn something like, you may have a time commitment that you need to do, but when you're learning something, you can choose what to learn or you can choose how long you're going to study for it. But you can't choose both. You get to choose what you want to learn or how long it's going to take, but you don't get both. So it's a struggle because if you're very committed to learning something in a fixed amount of time, probably not going to happen. But
Yeah.
given a long enough time frame, absolutely 100% you can learn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
and I think to that point too is like I think for anybody new that's trying to transition into this field, I think a good practice too, and I started doing this pretty early, was look at code that's beyond you. Start looking at, I mean, there's so much out there that you can freely access on GitHub, videos, whatever, but like start watching tutorials that are for like more intermediate people, or start just going on like, you can go on Next.js and look at their templates and down, you can
Yeah.
copy them and you can look at that code, and it just that exposure eventually over time it does help. And it just like when you're learning code, right? Like you practice it a bunch and eventually it starts to sink in how it's working, how the things go together, how they're interact, how the data is being changed and stuff. You start to see it and start to understand it. So it just takes that time and that exposure too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I want to mention this to the people in here because I know there's a lot of people in here in the web dev incubator. What you mentioned is right. Like definitely go to Next.js website and look at the templates because they have a bunch of great templates where you can look at code that other people have written. The other thing is inside our course curriculum, I just made a video on Git and GitHub, and that's one of the most powerful resources that you have as a developer to see other people's code. There's like literally billions of lines of code on GitHub that are available publicly that you can look at, and you can clone that code to your own computer and play around with it too. So you can explore other people's repositories, find some code that you like, and then clone it to your own computer and start messing around with it. And that's a great way to learn new things.
Yeah, start
Absolutely.
breaking it, start seeing like I do. That's one
Yeah.
of the best things too, is you clone a repo that works from somebody else, and then you just make changes to see how it breaks. Because that
Yeah.
starts to also help you make that connection between I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and the code, it's doing this, making these changes, or making this type of error, and why. And that's how you start learning. I mean, it's the only way is to just do things.
Yeah. I had a couple other suggestions for if you find yourself in a position where you're coding and you're just like absolutely lost. Number one is really what you already mentioned, Danny, which is take a break when you need to, right? If you are burned out and you're just like, I don't know what's going on here, take a break because your mind is going to work on that a little bit.
Real
On
quick,
some,
just on that point, I
yeah,
know this is happening to you. How many times has it happened to you where you're working like on a project for a client and you've been putting in like long days because you're trying to get it done, and like I've had this happens so many times where like it'll be like a 4 o'clock on like a day. I've already worked like 3 days on it, and like all of a sudden like nothing's making sense. I can't get things done. Then I
yeah,
take a break, come back to the next day, and it's like super easy to make whatever I was trying to make.
yeah,
It's like you just
yeah.
burnt yourself out
There's so many
completely.
times where I'm just like trying to figure out a problem too, and I'm like, I cannot figure out how to do this, like manipulate data or something weird like that, where you're just it uses like a complex part of your brain, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go. Like, I think one of the best things that I have is a dog because
Yeah.
the ability to just take her outside for 5 to 10 minutes and then come back to code is like amazing, right? Because it actually lets my mind take a break. And most of the time, when I try to stop thinking about code, is when my mind does all the work, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, duh, I should have just done that thing. And it's so simple most of the time. But yeah, we almost like think too much that we get in our own way, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, so the other things that I wanted to mention were if you're looking at code and you feel like a deer in headlights, there's a couple things that I use. Number one is breaking things down, and you say this a lot, Danny, breaking things down into the simplest parts. So when you start to look at code, it can look like this big monster, and there's all these moving parts and all these different things happening. And if when you start to look at it from like this bigger perspective view, it can get really confusing. But if you literally go line by line and say, what is going on here? What is going on here? What is going on here? And if you even have to comment in what is happening on each line of the code, that can be super effective because you start to really see the story of what's happening in code, right? It's literally another language. It's telling a story of what's happening to a user in that code. So if you can start breaking that down, and then the second part is relating that back to things that you do know, right? Because as a developer, you may not know everything, but you do know something. And the way that we learn is by stacking knowledge on top of things that we already know. It's always easier to learn something if it relates to something that you already know, especially if you can make it like an emotional thing. I know that's a little bit hard in coding, but that's how we learn as human beings. We have emotions and we stack information or like relate information to each other. So if you can take something that you already know about what do I know in this code and then see how that's working with something else and start pinning those things together, I think that's super powerful to start breaking down code that you don't know. And obviously, if there's something that you're just like, I don't get it at all, you can look that up. You can put it in ChatGPT and ask it, like, can you explain this stuff to me? And that's how you can start working through this code that looks absolutely crazy to you.
You know, it's funny. Like I remember, like when I was younger, like with the TV, and like thinking it was like magic. How like you just hit a button, the screen turns on, and all of a sudden, like pictures, images, whatever sound, all this stuff's happening. But you get older and you learn about the hardware and stuff, and you realize like if you really think about it, they're very simple machines. Like it's ones and zeros. So you can't,
Yeah.
everything's got all the complexity, it comes from simplicity, just like everything else. And I think that's what's always really helped me. I read that book Code, I think, Randall, you suggested, and I really liked it because it was all about the hardware, but it really makes you see that like, yes, like you can do all this amazing stuff, but it's all from really, really, really simple principles. And once you
Yes.
Yeah,
see
it's a
that,
good
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
it's a good book to read because it kind of takes a look at all technology and it starts from the premise of using a flashlight to communicate with your friend with like
Yeah.
Morse code.
That's
And
cool.
it
What's it called?
And
yeah,
Code?
code.
it's called Code. He builds one of the old processors and computers in the book on by
That's
words. Like
awesome.
just like yeah, it's really amazing and like
Really cool. I have
very
to
just
check it out.
helpful to like change your thinking about this because it is easy. Like well, it's like the same thing we run into with everybody in the crew too. Like people have ideas. You want to make a game or something, and it sounds easy, like Hangman or like Connect Four. Like we've talked about this before, but like the logic gets really complicated on the back end of that because you have all these interactions we don't think about normally because we just do it. We're people, we can just
Yeah.
do it, but the machine can't. So I think that's a very helpful way to think and kind of review, right? Like, or kind of realign your thinking in a way that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to mention a few things that are in the comments. Definitely, Jay and Anthony have been talking about, how to basically take intervals with your time on while you're coding. And I think Jay mentioned the Pomodoro timer, which I think we've discussed a couple times before. That's a great tool, but basically just adding breaks in every once in a while to allow your brain to sort of reset. Um, and I went to the eye doctor yesterday because I need to get new contacts. And I asked the eye doctor that too, because I was like, I spend a lot of time on a computer. Is there anything you suggest, to help me? And she literally said, which is kind of funny, like this idea of like, well, the best thing you can do on a computer, if you're on a computer, is like every hour, just take 5 minutes and like move your eyes so that you're looking like further away or something like that. And it's, it just goes right back to that. Is like you every hour or so, take a little break for 5 minutes and let your brain reset because you start staring at this stuff for too long and it starts to look like gibberish no matter what.
Well,
Um,
it's like
And
when you're
all
like it's like when you have a bug in your code and it's one character and you
yeah,
just can't find it because you've been looking at it and your brain like will fill stuff in. You'll miss, so you just need that time away to kind of like see it again, actually see it again for what it is, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, Randy, I think I
Else
cut
you
you
got?
off.
uh,
Oh,
well, I
go
was
ahead,
just
Ray.
gonna say, and also like if you're coding for extending periods of time, taking longer breaks in the middle. Like, I may do like 6 to 8 hours of work, but in the middle, there's where I go to the gym, there's where I have
Mm,
lunch, there's going to the park. So like all these different things help break up and get away from just sitting in front of my computer all day.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
getting
think
away is helpful. It is. I was gonna say too, we talked about knowing your why and what too, but keeping that at the front of your mind, like why you're doing
yeah,
this. Because when we first started out, man, for me, like I hated my job and I just knew there was no future in it. And keeping that in my mind, like that, yes, I spent 15 years doing this, but like now's my chance to do something else. I can do it. And like that was just so helpful to keep me motivated, even when I felt like a deer in headlights.
yeah, absolutely. I thought you brought up actually a good point here too, which is something that when we first started building this group, I talked a lot about this, but I don't think I've talked too much about it recently. And I think this is something that a lot of people overlook when they're getting into software development and even like intermediate and senior software developers, it probably especially senior software developers overlook, which is keeping your like body and mind right? Like we spend so much time on like technology. How do I learn this technology? And we forget that a lot of the technology that you're learning, you have to learn with your body. And if your body is not in check, if you're not working out every day, if you're not taking time for yourself to do things you love, if you're not like focusing on yourself too, it's going to make these things a lot harder for you, right? Like, and you nailed it on the head there too, which is like, if you're sitting here in front of a computer for hours a day, you need to take some time to not do that. Like, you need to take some time and go to the gym or go for a walk or whatever it is, and spend some time doing something else, something that you love, so that you can reset your brain, because we are not computers, right? We are human beings, and we need to remember that too as software developers. It's, yeah, like Randall said, that it's been huge for you, and it's huge for me. I work out every single day, and it's like the way that I'm able to clear my mind of whatever is going on, whether that's like interpersonal, like family stuff, coding stuff, colleague stuff, like working with other developer stuff. It allows you to clear your mind. It allows you to actually stay in shape and allow your brain to work how it's supposed to. And also another good one is that it makes you drink a lot of water, which is really good for your brain.
It is.
Because then you
No,
need to pee, and that's taking a break from the computer every hour.
Exactly. See, it's like all a cycle. It's like this
it
thing.
is. It's this thing you put together. It's just like, no, I
Yeah.
really like that one.
Anthony
That's a
said
really
it has
good
to be a
point.
balance. It's like this pee workout
Yeah.
coding balance. Exactly.
No, I really like that though, because it is true. Dude, if no matter how much you love something, if that's all you do, you'll end up hating it, because the rest of your life has nothing in it. Like, we
Yeah.
need to remember that, like, yes, we're trying to do this to learn these things to make our lives better, to improve our lives, right? But we also want to still have our life. So you need to like have things that you love, do things that you still enjoy so that, all of your life is improving. And then the learning process is just that much better. You're more motivated, more energetic. Like, it just is so much easier to do the things you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you guys have any other suggestions? I think we really covered that one as much
We
as
could
we
actually
could.
end this one on time.
I know.
Yeah,
It's
for
Goodness.
really,
once. We've never.
but before we do that, let's talk about the Web Dev Incubator, because
Yeah.
Bryce in the comments makes a good point. He wrote, find mentors or others to help look through your code. New eyes on it can help. It would also make you a better programmer with your concise comments. So I think that's a great point, is that, if you're out there and you are coding in isolation, you're doing yourself, you're basically shooting yourself in the foot, because uh, code doesn't exist in isolation. Whether you're trying to find a job, you're trying to build your own app, we as developers work in teams, and learning how to do that early on and often is very important, right? If you don't have a community, obviously you have this Facebook community, you can come hang out on our Saturday calls. But if you want something more, which, to be honest, if you really want to become a software developer, you're going to need more than just your own self-paced learning. You need to be part of a team. So that's what we offer inside the Web Dev Incubator. Go ahead, Danny. What do you want
I
to
know, I was
say?
gonna say, it's funny, like I always tell when I was teaching, I always tell my classes, like, if you have friends in this class, or even if you just kind of an acquaintance, like, meet with them when you do the reading and talk about it. Because
Yeah,
you always learn faster with others. You always do.
exactly.
It gives you another point of view, it gives you another perspective on things, and especially when you're working with experienced mentors, who know
Yeah.
how to convey the information and stuff and give you a path, help you with figuring out a path, man. You learn so much faster.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jay said this is teaching me proper work-life balance, and I think that's super true, right? Like, that's something that we focus on a lot inside the program, is the human element of becoming a developer, and helping you guys see it for more than just code. But like what you said, it's really about the community, right? So many times, and this is something that has sort of blown my mind as we built this community, is that seeing people who are in this community, everybody's at a different level too, right? You're not going to come in here and be like, everybody knows the same thing I know. Everybody's at a different level, has different interests. And so they're all working on their own things, which is really cool, because you all get to see different problems. And then through the communication inside of our group, you get to learn different things, because somebody may be working on, a Hangman app like Bryce, and he's like struggling with this thing, and he's like, hey, I just figured out the answer, and then he can share it with the group, and people are like, oh, I didn't even realize that was a thing. Like, I didn't know of that method before, but now you do. You have the exposure to it, because there's so many people in the group who are at different levels. They are working on different stuff, that you get to see things you wouldn't normally be exposed to, right? Like, if you're working, and this is another thing too, is like, if you're doing just like one curriculum, like Randall's in like the Odin project, other people have done like free code camp. You're just seeing what you see, right? And that's
Yeah.
all you're ever going to see is like what they're telling you in that. But if you have exposure to a community, different people are able to be working on different things at different times. Like inside, Eric's working on his homeschooling app, and he's running into a problem that Randall's not going to see in the Odin project because he's not working on a homeschooling app, right? So you get to have this exposure that you wouldn't normally have as a developer going through a boot camp where you're all learning the same exact thing at the same exact time, or any of the free resources that are out there.
I was gonna say too, Jamie had a great comment. I was just trying to find it. It's further up, but like, you know, so happy to have these experiences with people, have experienced people to help me without judgment. I think that's the other thing too, is that,
Yeah.
we've built this community where people are comfortable sharing, knowing
Yes.
that they're gonna get help. Nobody's gonna judge them because everybody's learning, dude. We
Yeah,
all know that.
exactly.
Like, so, and you need that space though to be able to grow. You need a comfortable space to share your stuff and to interact with others to then get beyond your own limits, right? And your own sort of obstacles that
Yeah.
you're facing. Yeah.
Yeah. Jay said that right here too. How important it is and how accepting everyone is makes me feel comfortable as a new person. This, you are new to software development. Everyone who comes into this program is new. And even if you're not, you're at some level that's not like you haven't accomplished your goals yet. So we all have this imposter syndrome, this feeling of maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe this isn't cut out for me. And I promise you,
And the
0%, 0% of senior expert developers were born that way. They were all
Yeah.
born dumb little babies, right?
I
Yeah.
was
That's
gonna
how I,
say, and the best part is the imposter syndrome never leaves.
Yeah, right.
yes, yeah, it never leaves. You're always gonna have that, but we teach
Because
you how
that's
to
how you
feel
learn to
comfortable
face
with
it.
that. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
exactly. So if you are interested in joining, you can just go to codenoobs.io, scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, and you can join there. Otherwise, you can just type imposter syndrome in the comments. We'll reach out to you, set up an action call. The action call is just a way that we can give you a little bit of free mentoring and tell you a little bit about the program, see if you're a good fit, and get you signed up. I will say this, that the beta is closing. I think next week we're closing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're on the fence, if you've been considering it for a while, this is the time to do it unless you want to pay a lot more. And who wants to pay more for the same thing? Right. So
Mhm.
if you're really interested in it, set up an action call with us, or you can go ahead and sign up if you really want to. But we are pretty selective. So we do want to make sure that you are a good fit for the program. So just set up an action call and we'll reach out to you, have a little discussion, and we can get set up if you're interested. Um, Anything else in here? I see
Well, Bryce's last
all these
comment.
comments come in. Yeah.
Yeah, Bryce said, building on Jay's comment, he said, I'm in a boot camp and my mentor has told me that I don't know the foundations, need to go back to the basics. It's not really true. And I think that's the truth too. He says, I developed apps that are far beyond foundations. And he says, this group's been awesome in supporting me and helping me. I think you find that a lot too, though. You get these boot camps and stuff where the instructors and stuff, they're not even happy with what they're doing anyway. And
Yeah.
so, they're not engaged. And then they end up doing stuff like that, putting people down who are learning. Like,
Yeah, and it's
it makes no
what's the
sense.
point of that? What is the point of telling you that you're not you need to go back to the no, you don't need to go back to the basics. In
It's
fact,
like
you're gonna
maybe you
get
need to
stuck
teach
in
it
the
better.
basics. If anything, you need to go beyond what you already know,
Yeah.
right? We're literally telling you the opposite of that. Don't go back to the stuff that you know. Go
Move
to the
on.
stuff that you don't know because you're gonna learn everything as like. Uh, this is actually a really good point. I want to mention this too because this is a question that Randall messaged me about earlier, and he's doing the Odin project, and he's like, I don't know if I'm ready to do this React portion of this yet. He's like, it just keeps beating me in the head that they said don't skip anything. And I mentioned this to him. I said, look, they said that because most people who come into this don't have a community, they don't have mentors, they don't have anyone to help them. And so they don't want you to skip anything because basically it builds on each other. But the reality is this too, right? Your learning process as a developer is not a straight line. It is not from here to there. It is all over the place, right? You're going to learn all sorts of different things as you like it's like an expansive thing, right? You start from basically knowing nothing and expands outward in every direction because there's so much to learn about everything. So that's something that Randall is able to do inside this program because he has a community. Like I told him, I was like, absolutely do that. You're already building a Next.js app. You already know like probably 90% of what you're going to learn in there. And anything that you don't know, you have a Telegram group where you can just reach out to us literally at any time of the day and say, hey, what does this thing do? I don't understand this. And you have multiple people who are willing to jump in and be like, hey, this is what it is. If you really need help, let's talk about it. Let's jump on a call, whatever it is. Like we're willing to help him, right? Just like everyone else inside the group. And you see it even just in the community members also. It's not just mentors, right? It's other people in the group who are like, hey, I dealt with that problem. This is how you fix it. Let me help you a little bit. Let me look it up. Like, and that's the other cool thing too, is I know Chris has done this as well inside the group, is he's like, I don't know the answer, but now I'm inspired to find the answer because I'm curious. And so he actually does the research. And I know other people in the group do that too. So I'm not going to keep going on about it. If you guys are interested, you know what to do. We'll throw a link in the description as well. But now is the time to join if you really are interested and you want to get the best possible price that you can. And there's just a lot of stuff in there that you get. You get 2 calls per week, mentoring calls, as well as that free private Telegram group. Free. It's not free. It's a private Telegram group for premium members. But anyway, anything else you guys have to say today? Any closing thoughts on being a deer in headlights, imposter syndrome, feeling overwhelmed?
It's just part of the journey. You just gotta keep on, just
Yeah.
stick with it. Like literally,
Keep on
if
keeping
you
on.
stick with it, you'll get there. And it's tough, it's difficult, but you know, that's what this group is here for. And yeah, just keep going one day at a time.
Yeah. Anthony said, take action. I think that is true. Couldn't be more true. Take lots of action. And don't worry about the outcome, right? Because you're just going to get better over time. So, all right, guys, thanks so much for watching another video with us, tuning in for another live stream on Saturday. If you're inside the Web Dev Incubator, we will see you in about 30 minutes. Today, we're going to actually do our quarterly planning, which is super exciting. If you're inside the Web Dev Incubator, I also just released a new video, which is the new quarterly planning that we're going to do today. So you'll have that, but we're doing it all as a group today. So that's just something awesome that we provide as well. Like if you're learning software development, you're like, I don't know how to get to my goals. That's what we do in quarterly planning, is we literally structure out your next quarter so that you know exactly what you should be doing this quarter. So I'm really excited because I just rebuilt the quarterly planning. I think it's going to be even more powerful than it was before. Hopefully you guys think so as well. So looking forward to hanging out with you guys in about 20 minutes or so. We'll send the link inside the Telegram group. And that's it for today. Peace.